What is up, guys? It's Toyd with Justin, the DIY audio guy. How are you doing today, Justin?
I'm good. I still have this nagging cough, and so I'm going to have to hit the mute button in a second. And
Jeez, he planned that. I swear he must have planned that.
sorry
I'm going to hit
about
the mute
that.
button.
Sorry about that. It's
All right. So today,
I can't seem to shake it.
So what are we talking about today, Justin?
We are talking about measurement today, in all types of measurement and equipment and stuff that you might need to set up a home or car audio system.
So we're going to talk a lot about how you can do this yourself. So how can you test audio equipment? What would you need to test it? What would you want to do to calibrate like video equipment and things of that nature? And those types of things. So this is one of those videos that both Justin and I feel might be very valuable to you guys. At least we hope so. We're going to try to do our best by giving you the most comprehensive information that we can in a video like this. If you have questions, make sure to hit them down below. But we also would highly, we would appreciate, let's put it that way, highly appreciate if you guys find this information valuable to go ahead and hit us up with some super chats, because this is hopefully going to be an episode that can really turn some heads into what you need to do when you want to test audio and video, especially if you're a YouTuber or someone that wants to start doing this. Or just calibrate your own stuff for that matter.
Looks like we got a good crowd in the chat today. I see some of the usual suspects. I always like to say hello to everybody. I see Mullen is here and El Fuego is here and AJC 9988. David K is always in the chat. It's good to see everybody.
Yeah, and AJC, we're going to be talking about the iDisplay Pro, which is by X-Rite, which actually doesn't exist anymore. It does, but it doesn't. We'll be talking about that. And we're going to be talking about audio first. But let's talk about audio first, because that's really where we mainly start talking about things. And one of the reasons why we're going to be talking about video as well is because I'm going to start doing some video calibration tests on the channel. And so those are going to be some really cool things. But before we do that, let's talk audio. Justin, what do you think, if I could only give you one tool for audio?
One tool.
What's the one? What's the one tool you would
had one tool to do car audio with?
Only to do measurements or whatever you want. Yeah,
measurements of any type. If you only had one tool, that's a tough one, because I'm tempted to say something like an RTA, especially if we talk about something like the a full featured RTA, like the DM RTA from Audio Control. But most DIYers aren't going to buy a DM RTA from Audio Control, because it is, you buy the Pro kit, it's nearly $1,000.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like what you're saying is there really is not one tool.
And that would be, I mean, it's not the answer you're probably expecting me to give, but something like that would probably be the one tool, but it's impractical. And so that means the one tool would be the cheap oscilloscope. I put a multimeter down on my list of tools that you might want to get. And I just picked a Klein, a good Solos multimeter. And I also put the cheap Lumi. And okay, if you go and buy it on Amazon, it's not Lumi anymore. It's something else, but it's still an LM 2020. It looks exactly the same. It might be different, but as far as I know, it operates exactly the same. They were really dirt cheap, like $70 for Black Friday. And now they're back up to kind of their near normal price. But the beauty of something like this is it does everything a multimeter will do. You can test continuity. You can test AC voltage. You can test DC voltage. And of course, you can see the AC waveform so that you can find out where your amplifier clips.
So let's talk about that. So, while we're talking about this, we want to talk to what's the importance of this oscilloscope. So one of the reasons why you would want this oscilloscope is to find out at what volume you can turn this up in order to hit clipping on your car amplifier. And you can do this on a home amplifier. You can do this on any type of amplifier. So this is not just for car audio, right?
No, any audio signal. If you want to try to find that spot, that sweet spot where you've got the most possible power without introducing any extraneous distortion or noise. Hey, David K, thank you.
Thank you. And that really does make us know that we are on the right track for you guys. You guys are learning stuff. So thank you so much for that. If you learned something, I'd love, if you can, obviously, do a super chat. That'd be great. Now, you're saying, so what we do is we run this waveform, and we're going out typically the RCA outs or the speaker wire out, correct?
Right. So you play a test tone, and you can measure either the RCAs, or you can measure the speaker outputs. You can measure the output from the amplifier. And ideally, what you want to do if you set your gains is you want to set the gains front to back on the entire system. So if you start off with a head unit, and that head unit has, let's just say you're using the RCA outputs, ideally, you're going to want to set your gains by checking for clipping on the RCA outputs. Now, there's some debate about whether or not you need to bother with a subwoofer, because I think it was I'm blanking on his name, the British guy who takes apart the amplifiers and puts them back together live on camera. Sam at Bear Vids, he did a test and he showed that when you run a clip signal into a Class D amplifier, the Class D circuitry cleans it up, a subwoofer amplifier. And so maybe it's not that important. But the basic idea is that you'll want to play, and I guess you need something to play music with, and that's part of your test equipment, right? The ability to play the music, to play the test tones is part of it. You start off at the head unit, and you play a 0 dB, that's 0 dB full scale is what they call that. And what that is, 0 dB full scale is as loud as you can possibly have a recording. That's an industry standard. So you can't be louder than 0 dB.
And are you playing like 1,000 hertz, or what are you playing?
So the general rule of thumb is to play 1,000 hertz for your mids and highs and 40 hertz for your subwoofer. But that's really just a rule of thumb people use. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to try it at 1,000 and try it at 2,000 and try it at 500, because this whole gain setting isn't anywhere near that precise. So the 1,000 is just a good shortcut. So you check the head unit for clipping. And if you're running from your head unit to a DSP, you run it out of the DSP, you check that for clipping, make sure it's coming out of the DSP clean. And maybe you got a bass knob. Well, you want to make sure the bass knob's not clipping either, like one of those RCA knobs that are so cool and trendy. And then you check for clipping at the amplifier.
So basically what we're going to do is we're going to hook up this oscilloscope to either the RCA outputs or the speaker wire output. We're going to do exactly what you said, play 1,000 hertz for our mids and highs, and we're going to be playing 40 hertz for our subwoofer. And we're going to look at the oscilloscope, and the oscilloscope is going to show a waveform. And if that waveform is nice and curvy, we're good to go. But as soon as that waveform hits a square, so it starts from going from a curve to a square, then we've done something wrong. So let me show the
you got a picture,
folks at home what we're talking about with oscilloscopes. And I have two here to show you. So here's the first oscilloscope. This is the one you're talking about. This is the Lumi.
Right.
It's
this
now
the 2020. Yeah.
The Shapolis. And it's the 2020. And this thing's pretty cool. It's only $90. And this is the waveform we're talking about. See how it's nice and curvy in that picture? If it had a sharp edge on there, that means you've gone too far. So, for example, a lot of head units, once you go past like 3/4, for example, it'll start clipping. And that clipping will actually damage your equipment. It'll damage your subwoofer. So you want to be able to know, all right, I don't want to go past this spot on my...
You'll smell it before it lets go. You'll smell the coils heating up. And there's at the bottom, there's a square wave there, Nick. Show them that square wave.
Yeah, this is the square wave.
It looks like. And so if you want to see it for yourself, you just hook up the oscilloscope and crank the volume up, and you can get a square wave out of any amplifier. They'll all give you one.
So I'm going to show you a different oscilloscope that I found too that I'm interested in. I'm not sure which one I want to go with because I am going to buy one.
While you're pulling that up, there's something else I want to point out. Two things. One, it's possible when you're checking your scope out that you might see what I call fuzz, where there's a little bit of fuzz around the top and the bottom of the wave before it starts clipping. That is the high frequency switching noise that you get with a Class D amplifier, and you're not going to hear that. It's not going to make it through your crossover filters, and your subwoofer is not going to play it. And so that's no damage. It's like 40,000 hertz. And the other thing you got to watch out for, you can see it. Sometimes the wave won't clip, but you can see another wave riding on your wave, like a carrier wave. And sometimes you can see the wave deform. It'll start to look wonky. It won't be a nice, smooth up and down. It'll start to kind of like looking through a mirror, a funhouse mirror. And so if you see it doing the funhouse mirror thing, or if you see another wave riding along the first wave, then you've hit some distortion before clipping. You've got a dirty amplifier. You've got something wrong with the signal.
Or it
You've
could
got some
be
extraneous
anything
noise
in the line. Yeah.
And if you want to see a good image of that, when I tested the NVX bass processor, when you turn the bass processor up, it had that because the scope was picking up the extra frequency the bass processor was manufacturing.
So I want to show this oscilloscope. So this is a tablet style oscilloscope. It looks pretty neat. You can actually save pictures on this, and you can USB it over to your computer. And the thing that I like about this one over something like the Lumi is this one has BNC style connectors. Are you familiar with BNC style connectors?
No idea what the heck that is.
Okay. It's no, a lot of people aren't going to know because this is basically a video style connector, right? So a lot of monitors use these style connectors, but your normal television used RCAs. Now, the cool thing about the BNC connectors is you can get...
It looks a little bit like coaxial or like an FM antenna plug-in back old school.
Basically, very similar. Yep. Basic concept. Same basic concept. Now, the cool thing about this is you can actually buy an adapter for the BNC that actually has an RCA, like female or male end to it, and you can plug your amplifier directly into it, where you wouldn't be able to do that with something like the Lumi. So that's one of the reasons why I kind of like this. And it is battery powered, so you can take it anywhere. Well, so is the Lumi. But
one thing that I've learned is you can splice an RCA end to just like the inputs on these things appear to be just regular old banana plugs. Not banana plugs. I'm thinking the wrong thing. Yeah. Just the plugs, like you just plug them right in, right? When the hi-fi wires you made, what are those called?
Oh,
I've got the name wrong, I think.
What'd you say? I don't know. Binding post? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
banana plugs?
The binding post, you just plug. Is it the banana plug? Is that what it's called?
That you plug into a binding post?
Yeah.
So now you confuse, you confused even me.
You can splice anything to anything is what I'm saying. So
you can. I like the fact that when the RCA is a nice tight connection, then you know you're not getting any outside interference or noise. At least as long as you're using a good shielded cable. All right. First of all, I don't know that I did this, but thank you so much, David K, for the super chat. We really appreciate it. And it really does tell us a lot about you guys enjoying this information. We're going to spend a little bit more time on audio, and then we're going to switch to video. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about audio. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I use for testing speakers. And now this would be what I would use for testing. I don't care if they're pre-made speakers. I don't care if they're speakers you're building. You need these two pieces of equipment. The first thing you're going to need is a measurement microphone. Now, the cheapest measurement microphone that I would recommend getting is something like the UMIC 1. They did come out with the UMIC 2, which I know Justin put on the list. And the one that I recommend for people that are doing this a lot, like if you're starting a YouTube channel and you want to do audio testing a lot, or if you're building a lot of speakers and you want to sell them, or if you're just building a lot in general, I recommend the Omni mic over it. It's almost the same price as UMIC 2. It's actually only like $20 difference in the UMIC 2. But the Omni mic software...
for a second. The guys in the chat are saying your mic's a little bit hot. I think they're right.
Okay. Let's turn down some. So, all right. Let's see if that's better. You guys can tell me if it's not.
Much better.
So anyway, back to what we were talking about. Or the Omni mic. And the reason why the Omni mic software is a little bit easier to use, sets up the right test tones for you. Typically, for someone beginning, it's easier to get the right measurements, which is nice. But otherwise, you'll use the program RU. You spend a little bit more time learning it, but it is a free program that is very, very powerful. Just make sure that you learn the program. Don't just assume that once you hook it up and you start testing measurements of speakers, you're not going to be able to, it's not going to give you the right information until you set it up properly.
And here's something that's cool about these mics, Nick, that's worth pointing out. This is my UMIC 1. And if you look at the bottom of the serial number down there, there's a little number written, and the number is also on the box. That is a unique identifier, and you can go and download a calibration file for all these kind of mics. And that's what
Yeah.
makes
So
them wonderful. They're not great microphones. They don't actually sound very good. You wouldn't want to use them in your live stream. But when you calibrate them, the software is going to basically read a flat signal as flat.
yeah, basically what it does is the software tells the hardware where it's not measuring right. The microphone by itself doesn't measure flat. It's basically the software information that goes into it that tells it, okay, this is where this measures incorrectly and how to fix it. So when we're measuring speakers, here's a couple things to keep in mind that if you're measuring them indoors, which you can do, you need to get your gating correctly, which with the Omni mic, you just select on your impulse where you're seeing it, a difference on your impulse, and that's pretty easy.
And that's a control
And
in the
Ryu,
software.
yeah, and Rue, you have to manually figure that out and input the data in.
Because Omni mic is a system. It's not just the microphone, it's the microphone and the software, right?
It is, yep. And so, and you can use Rue with an Omni mic, but you can't use a UMIC with Omni mic software. So, for me, if you're testing indoors, I like to test typically about 16 inches away, like with a normal bookshelf. And that's going to be tweeter level, although you don't always have to test tweeter level. So typically what we say is when you're designing a crossover or when you're taking measurements to find out like how a speaker does, you want to test it on what you believe the axes to be, or on axes. So for example, if you're testing monitors that you think are going to be sitting on your desk and your head's going to be way above them, then that's the axes you should probably be measuring it at. And you might want to measure it on axes too to see what's going on. Because believe it or not, that's going to make a huge difference in the actual measurement that you measure. Same thing with tower speakers. If you've built some tower speakers and you think that really the center point is not going to be the tweeter, it's actually going to be lower, maybe at the mid woofer or something like that, then you can test for there. You have some leniency there. However, when you're testing for reviews, almost always are you testing directly on axes on the tweeter itself.
Anytime I test a speaker and I, show a video of my testing process, there's always people in the comments giving me all kinds of pointers on how to do it. So if you're just trying to get a measurement for comparison purposes, if you're not trying to get in-room response, what's the best way to set up to measure a speaker? What's the best way, and how does it work in a practical world? Right. So I think about
you can test in room. I mean, I think most people do. You test in room about 16 inches away. You want it typically a midpoint between your ceiling and floor. You don't want any walls necessarily near it. You want that to be kind of in the middle. I would definitely recommend a speaker stand if you can get one, something of that nature. They'll get it off the ground. Wherever it bounces first is going to be your first reflection. So if that's the floor, then we know, that we're going to have to change the impulse based on that floor bounce. But really, you just want to do that and get it about 16 inches typically away. As long as you're getting a good response of both the tweeter and the midwoofer from that point in time, you should be good. Now, a little bit harder to do with tower speakers for obvious reasons. But that's it. Now, if you want a good response to the bass, do a close mic of the actual subwoofer or speaker itself. So, for example, with a subwoofer, when we do measurements, if we do measurements at the listening position, you're not measuring your subwoofer, you're measuring your room. Okay. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. So I did that video on the 22-inch subwoofers, and I showed a couple measurements in that subwoofer. The first one was a close mic measurement of the subwoofer itself, and it didn't look very good. It was cutting off around like 45 hertz. But when I moved the microphone back to my listening position, now all of a sudden we got frequency response down to 10 hertz. Why? Well, because those bass frequencies are so long, they're wrapping around, and I'm getting what we call room gain. And so that's one of those times you want to ask yourself, what do I want to measure? Do I want to measure the room response, or do I want to measure the actual driver response? If I want to measure just the subwoofer response, you measure close mic. And what we mean by close mic is just like within less than an inch away from the subwoofer. You just don't want the subwoofer to hit the microphone.
Right. And I think it is interesting, how you measure will impact the sound. But if you're trying to set up for your room, measuring it in the room is the way to go.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you're just testing things out, I mean, as long as the testing environment is consistent, you can prove your point.
Yeah, and I mean that's the great thing about like building speakers. If you're building your own speakers, you can, or if you're doing active speakers or something of that nature, you can basically sit in your listening position and tune them to that position if they're going to stay exactly there. Which is
All right.
nice.
Cool. What else you got?
All right. Well, the only other thing is DATs. Why don't you? We both brought up DATs, so why don't you talk about DATs? Because
Oh yeah, you know how I love the DATs, so I always bring the props with me here. So there's my DATs.
oh, so
many things.
Brian Steele. Hold on one second. Brian Steele brought up a good point. He said close mic is well for sealed. Vented subs are a little bit more difficult. With a vented sub, you do have to also measure the port itself and combine the graphs. I didn't mention that. The other way you can do this, which a lot of people do, is a ground plane measurement, which we're not going to talk a lot about, but basically you put your microphone at a ground plane, and you're going to put your sub basically tilted towards the ground, and you're going to take a measurement that way. You can also do a ground plane measurement as well, but that's besides the point. You can do either one. But with a ported sub, you do need to measure the ports or passive radiators.
Right. All right, DATs. A ton of things you can do with the DATs. And one thing to kind of point out with the DATs is the downside of a DATs is you need a computer to make it work. That means dragging whatever you're testing to wherever your desktop happens to be, or getting a laptop and dragging the laptop to wherever your testing equipment happens to be. And an alternative to a DATS is the SMD IMSG. It's a signal generator that will also measure impedance. And so a lot of what you can do with the DATS, you can do with that as well. Now, a DATS will measure capacitors and inductors. And so that's really handy if you're building crossovers. So if you're like Nick and you're like, great, I'm gonna build my own crossovers, and you probably have a pile of crossover parts laying around. And if you're really wanting to build high-end stuff, it might be smart to check them all to make sure that they're within tolerance. Because everything's got a manufacturing tolerance. So it's useful for that. I mostly use it to check the box for the tuning frequency of ported and passive radiator enclosures. But you can use it to sweep a regular speaker, like a home audio tweeter, a mid-range speaker, can't you? What happens when you do that?
Sure. It just, like, the biggest thing is it gives you your impedance graph. So it shows you if you're going to have any issues with your impedance, if it's rising too high or rising too low. For example, if you have a crossover and you're working on a crossover point and your impedance is now dropping to 2 ohms and you want a 4 ohm impedance speaker at the end, that's probably not going to work out well, depending on where it's at. So, that means you're going to have to rework your crossover to be able to get that. Same with our speakers. What we were talking about, when you do an impedance graph of either a ported or passive radiator, you're going to see 2 humps in the impedance. Okay. And then the bottom between those 2 humps is your tuning frequency. So it's really easy to say, hey, this is where my speakers tuned to, this is where my passive radiators are tuned to a certain degree, which is what Justin's saying. So if you know that you wanted to tune at 35 hertz, it's a good way to double check and make sure you were tuned to 35 hertz or 20 hertz or 18 hertz.
So here's a question for you, Nick. Let's imagine that you're building a set of bookshelf speakers and you've built the crossover, you've hooked everything up, you turn it on, it doesn't quite sound right. Like maybe one of the speakers isn't attached somewhere, or you've botched the crossover, so you've got a break in the circuit. You could run the DAT sweep and it would tell you if the tweeter wasn't hooked up, right? You would know by looking at the pattern.
I mean, there's a lot of ways to tell that. You can tell that with the microphone. You can tell that with, that's your impedance.
It'll be obvious just listening to it.
Well, yeah. I typically use my measurement microphone first, because that will tell me, like, for example, if I have a reverse phase, if I had the tweeter out of phase with the woofer, for example, I hooked the positive negative up wrong, it's going to show me that dip where I have the phasing wrong. Same
When
with
you do
same
that,
with
do you prefer to run a sweep or do you prefer to play white noise?
I usually do a sweep.
You'll get the same result, won't you?
Yeah, I mean it's just dependent on how you want to do it. I do a sweep because it's going to show me where the issue lies as well. So when I'm doing a sweep and I'm looking at it, I'm going to say, oh yeah, here's what's going on at my crossover point. I had this huge dip. So now that I know that I have a huge dip at my crossover point, then I know that I've probably wired these out of phase. And then I can flip the phasing of either the woofer or the tweeter and be good to go.
But back to the DATs, this is something I learned watching Aaron's Audio Corner. He ran a sweep one time on some expensive speakers whose I'm not going to name the brand because I don't want to trash a brand. And he said you could see in the pattern of the impedance plot where there's resonances that were there basically because the box wasn't braced enough. I discovered a solder joint broke on the speakers I built. Quite obvious in the measurement. Yeah. Yep.
Wow, dang. David K. Thanks. The second one tonight by David K. Man, someone needs to join in on David K. But thank you, David K. We really appreciate that. Let's hit him up, guys. Show some love, and we do appreciate this. Well, so True Voice Reason said, what are you calling a huge dip? Well, typically, if your crossover is in phase, you're going to have a pretty substantial dip if your phasing's incorrect. There are speakers like Klipsch. I'll mention Klipsch because Klipsch does this a lot, where the way that they do their crossover, they just have a dip in the typically between the two crossover points in general. In fact, I'm reviewing some speakers right now that have a huge dip. That I wouldn't say huge, but they have a dip in there, and it is because of phasing issue. It's because of the crossover they chose to put. Let's do it that way. Sometimes people don't give themselves enough coverage in that crossover region. And you can see that.
And what happens is when you run signal through a passive crossover, the voltage and the current don't match each other. There's a phase shift that goes on. And so if you have a 12 decibel per octave, 2-component tweeter and a coil and a cap going to your mid bass and going to your tweeter, you'll end up right dead on the crossover frequency, 180 degrees out of phase, and they'll cancel each other out right at that one point, and there's a noticeable dip. And how well can you hear it? I don't know, but it definitely shows up in the measurement.
Yeah, you can hear it. A lot of times when people have built things like the overnight sensations, when they have an issue, a lot of times it's because the crossover, they reversed the phase somewhere. Now, let's talk about those resonances again and tell you how you can see that. So when you're running that impedance sweep, once again, inside your enclosure, let's just say for a subwoofer, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to see your impedance like normal, but then all of a sudden you're going to see these really weird striations from what it would normally be. So typically an impedance curve would go up, like for a sealed enclosure would go up and then kind of dip down and then go back up. And it would be pretty much a straight line. But when we see these striations, what happens? It goes up, it goes down, and then all of a sudden we see a hump here, and then we see a hump here, and then another hump, and another hump.
Blips in what should be a smooth curve, yeah.
Yeah, and typically what there'll be a doubling of the frequency of these blips. So we'll say, let's say the first blip we see is like at 120 hertz, and the next one might be at 240 and then 360. And that's because that's the frequency that we're having resonating issues at. And so we need to take care of that. And that's really good because if you are building a speaker and you're saying, hey, the low end doesn't sound good, or maybe this is sounding, well, it's probably some type of resonance somewhere that you can take care of very easily with just a program like that. And hardware.
Well, you can find it easily. Can you take care of it easily? I don't know.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much.
You are right, David. Let's share the cheer. Yeah, it is Christmas time. Thank you, Jason and David K. You guys are awesome. We really appreciate it. You'd have no idea how much that means to us because we're trying to give good information out. And, that just really does solidify it for us. So we really appreciate that. Wow, El Fuego came through too. Keep up the technical content. Oh, wow. It's much appreciated in the audio community. Thank you, guys. And hopefully the video community too, because we're going to be talking video symbol. I still think you have more things you want to talk audio, right?
You know what? I can talk forever. So I want to bring something up real quick. We talked about measurement microphones and PC software. I'm not an Apple guy. Apple has their own solutions, but this right here, I don't know well you can see it. This
Oh
is
yeah.
Dayton Audio IMM6. Have you got one of these? You've got one, don't you?
No, I don't have that.
So they have a new
Sorry.
version. So this version right here is it's got a TRRS plug right here, and then a microphone input here. And then you can still plug in like your headphones, right? So this plugs into the headphone jack. Not that anything has a headphone jack anymore. You got to buy an adapter, but you can take this right here. And let me see if I can share my screen real quick here. I should have thought about that before I started talking.
No, you're fine. This is nice because this is a very mobile item.
Right. So this is, you can plug it into an Android tablet, Android phone. And this is the app that I use. It's called Audio Tool, right? And it's just an RTA app. And so one of the things that I've done, and I got this idea. I stole the idea from 5-Star, who stole the idea from Kicker, is what I did. And so what you can do is you can buy one of these, and then you can listen to the audio coming out of the speakers, and you have your RTA, so you can see the frequency response that's intended for white noise. And then you can also rig up an RTA. And I've got a video of this on the channel. And the key thing you need is, there's only one company who makes it. The company's called Headset Buddy. It's an adapter with an attenuator in it.
Oh,
and
that's cool.
That just then plugs right into an adapter that goes into the USB-C port. And then you plug in your RCAs. And now you can plug into RCAs, and you can read RCA signal and look at the white noise through your RTA app. And if you want to look at speaker level, you just get yourself a LOC, a line output converter of any type, and you just wire that sucker in, and you're off and running. And so just plug the RCAs into that and wire the speaker leads into the speaker. And the cat now has seen the wires, and it's crazy time.
Hey, I want to give a special shout out to Brian Rollerson, who didn't say anything, but thank you for that. Brian has just posted actually some speakers he built on the website, as well as an amplifier project on toidsdiyaudio.com. Pretty cool. He actually built the Toids versus Kirby, and everyone then asked me what's going on with Kirby. By the way, I don't know. My guess is as good as yours. Last I talked to him, he was doing well, and I hope that is still the case, because we all, at least everyone that I talked to, loves Kirby, and he did some really cool stuff for the Kirby, for the community. So thanks, Brian, as well, for posting those pictures. I can't wait. Hopefully other people will see them. That's actually really cool what you just brought out, because that's something that you really DIY'd. It's not something that was a bought product. So that's pretty cool. You're muted.
It's a little finicky. It's harder to put up with and deal with. You got to put the thing together every time you need it, that kind of thing. But you know, the next closest thing is going to be the one that Dean and Fernando sell, and you know, theirs is a couple $100 or whatever, and it's only an iOS device. And after that, you're at a phonic RTA, which is, you know, $500 or $600, and then from there you're at the DM RTA. And I don't know, an RTA is worth having, and you know, you can buy the parts off Amazon and build yourself an RTA. So, and again, I got a video on my channel that shows how it's done.
Yeah, and that's relatively inexpensive as well.
Especially if you already have a line output converter. And I'd say 90% of the people in the chat have a line output converter sitting in a drawer somewhere. Is that true, y'all? Line output converter, you got one sitting in a drawer? Yeah.
So let's ask. So let's explain what's the advantage of doing that.
Of an RTA?
Yeah, just in general, with plugging into everything. What do you find the advantage of that?
So it lets you see where your crossover frequencies are, and that's handy. It gives you a visualization of that. And the other thing,
and if you're using DSP, audio, you can. I'm sorry.
Right. I did that in that last 2 videos ago when I did the video on the head unit, that Android unit, which apparently people just love that video. It's going pretty strong, and people are buying them like crazy off Amazon. I hope they all last more than 15 minutes. So I use that so you can visualize the crossover slopes, and it's really handy if you want to see what the factory radio is doing to its output. So there's two things that happen with factory car radios. The first thing they'll do is they'll just not have any bass, and they'll cut the bass out entirely so that so they don't mess up the speakers. And the other thing they do is a type of roll off, where as the volume goes up, everything gets louder except for the bass. And again, they do that to keep you from destroying the factory speakers. And you use the RTA to measure that, observe that, and see if you need to buy a bass restoration processor.
Got you. All right.
Awesome. Okay.
Let me ask you, any other audio before we go to video?
Let's do some video. I feel like I've been talking too much. Let's let you roll for a while. I got off on my nerdy little side jag there. So
let's talk 5 more minutes about audio, because there's one more thing that we didn't bring up, and that's the SPL meter. We both brought up the idea of an SPL meter. In home audio, the reason why you might want an SPL meter is so that you can set. Now, a lot of receivers now allow you to will automatically do auto room calibration. But a lot of people still want to fine tune like where they're seating and what volume they want their speakers to. So you can use that. You can also find out how loud your system actually goes. All right, let's see. Which one do you have? The CFM.
So this is one I got from Parts Express. And so this one really isn't designed for like your SPL competition kind of thing. It's more of your everyday, how loud is it in the room? And so now it's saying that I'm 65 decibels as I'm talking. And so this is handy if you're not like, running loud subwoofers to see how loud your setup is. And sometimes it's nice to have something like this where you can walk into your backyard and find out how loud your neighbors are.
Yeah. Well, and
keep around if you live in one of those states that's going after loud bass cars again. So you can walk 20 feet away from your car and turn this on and see how loud you are.
So your good SPL meters will tell you what SPL they're ranked up to. So at Parts Express, they have one, I think, that's ranked up to 120 decibels and one that's ranked up to 140. And then if you want to go above 140, then you're going to have to get something else that's going to be a lot more expensive. Something.
And this is kind of more of a pressure meter, so it uses it's not a microphone-based device. There are several companies that sell things. This is the SPL Labs SPL Mini. I use this. Do I really endorse it? I wish I would have gotten one of their other products, because they have ones that can be Bluetooth to a telephone. They're much more convenient. And this thing is horrible to use. The manual makes no sense. Every time I get it out, I've got to go watch Hi-Fi Vegas how-to video, because I never understand how to use it. And so the user interface on this thing is just asinine. So I can't say that I endorse their product, but it is one of the cheaper ones. And of course, there's the Term Lab as well, and a couple others on the market. But this is what you want to use if if you want to know what your car is going to meter in a competition, because it's supposed to be calibrated to a Term Lab.
Nice. Yeah, and there's all kinds of different ones you can get, all different prices. How much did something like that cost you?
This was under 300, and it's probably the cheapest one.
Yeah, I was going to say they start really going up.
And this company here, you can buy one that has like wireless modules, so you can wirelessly monitor your voltage and your current, like with a clamp meter, in addition to your SPL, all kind of cool stuff. So you can add stuff to it. I wouldn't recommend the base model. I'd go ahead and get the one that you can add to an upgrade.
Yeah.
This one's okay, but I feel like spending $50 more to get something better would have been better.
For most people in home theater, the one that reads 120 SPL is more than enough, because you really shouldn't be going anywhere near, which is that one. Yeah. Anyone that, if you're doing competition and things of that nature, the 140 might be okay if you're doing SPL competitions, but then after that, you're going to, like, if you're starting to hit over 140s, you're going to have to go with something more than that. And that's when you start spending a lot of money.
AJC mentioned looking at the frequency range on the meters that are supposed to be, this one is showing dBA, so it's A-weighted decibels, and they should all tell you what their weighting is. And most of them should have a peak hold. This one's got a peak hold where you push the button and it will just keep going up as you get louder. It's not louder than 67.6. So
and he brings up
fine.
He brings up a good point too, because you want to make sure that it's accurate at low levels, low frequency for that matter. Yeah.
Yeah. And this was like $20. I mean, it's yeah, you know, that's.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you right now that if you're looking at like a really decent SPL meter, they're probably going to range at the minimum end of like $130. And on up. If you want just like a real basic one, $20 is going to get you something. It's probably not going to be nearly as accurate as some of the more expensive ones, though. All right, so
let's talk video, man. You have some kind of cool video trick you want to show me.
Yeah, so we're going to start doing some video on the channel. We're going to do video calibration. And the real question people ask is, why do I even care about that? And the basic premise is we pay attention to a lot to our audio system, as we should be, because we understand that if we calibrate our audio system correctly, we're going to get a lot better sound out of it than if we were just to play them normally. And the same can be said for your video. And so the truth of the matter is, it's actually not very expensive for you to get into video calibration right off the bat. And it just takes some time to get used to it. I'm going to tell you about some of the programs you can use, and I'm going to show you some of the meters. In order for you to get one television calibrated in your house, to hire a professional, Justin, do you know how much it's going to cost you? Of course. Or anyone I ask?
No idea. No idea. I'm using my video just in case just to see if that speeds things up a little bit.
Okay. Typically, it's about $450, and around that average for one television. So you can get set up for all your video calibration for underneath that one price. And so what you need at the bare minimum is what we call a colorimeter. You ever seen one of these?
No, I've never seen one of those. What is that?
So this is what AJC was talking about earlier. He said, hey, a lot of hobby people own the iDisplay Pro, and there's different versions of these. There's the Spider X, and then there's these Calibrite, which is now X-Rite. X-Rite has been bought out, and they came in with Calibrite. And they have the Display Pro, and this is a Display Plus. This is actually a step above. This is what I would say that most people would want if they're going to calibrate an HDR television. So if you have a television with high dynamic range or Dolby Vision, you want a calibration like this. And the reason why is your television has brightness settings. And for HDR, you want to calibrate your television to at least 1000 nits. So Netflix says 1000 nits. Dolby Vision says at least 1000 nits. If you can do more, do more. And the Pro, as well as I believe the Spider X doesn't actually say, but I believe the Spider X can do 1000 nits. Only do 1000. This one can go up to 2000. So it's basically your brightness level on your television. So HDR has a lot of different colors in your color spectrum that are very bright. And you want to make sure that you can do that to the highest nit possible. So something like the Plus will do 2000 nits, where the Pro and the Spider X only do 1000 nits. And unfortunately, there's no standard of exactly what you want to calibrate your HDR television to, like how many nits. But the more, potentially the better it can be. Yeah, and he says it right. Nits is candles per meter. You sometimes see people do it CD/M, which is another way of saying it. It's not a nitwit. I'll tell you that much. It's not a nit. And 25 hertz life is funny because he says, hey, 300 nits is all I need on my laptop. And that's what some people do. On some people's screens, for example, you can only do 100 nits. Like SDR is only 100 nits, although some people will do more than that. But basically what this allows you to do is get your blacks right. Have you ever seen like a television where like you're having a really hard time seeing, like when the screen gets dark, you have a really hard time seeing, and then you turn up your brightness really bright, and then it's just like grays everything out?
Right.
That's the reason why we calibrate, so that we can get the definition in those black scenes without having to brighten that up. So
it's a
what this
white balance
does,
correction.
white balance, grayscale, and color. It depends on what all your TV
Okay.
allows. But this, for example, turns around and it sits right on your screen, your television screen or whatever. And then you send signals to it, and then you use a program to calibrate it. Now, if you're using it like on a computer monitor or something like a hard drive, the program itself will calibrate it and use software to calibrate your monitor to the best possible. You don't even really have to do anything physically.
Okay.
But on a television, we have to actually manually adjust these. And so we need some type of software to go with it. It doesn't come with the meter. So most DIYers are using software called HCFR, which
Can you pull
I
that
hate
up
to
so
say,
you can see it?
I will. I hate to say it hasn't been like actually really like touched since like 2018, but it still works really, really good, which is good. And I'm trying to pull up some decent images of this. But when you see channels like, websites like ratings, RTINGS, or is it RT? I think there's no I in there. RTNGS, I think it is. When you see these types of websites, what they're doing is they're doing this, and then they're telling you, how accurate is the color out of the box, and then what do you need to do to make it accurate for your room, or at least hopefully give you some starting points. And that's kind of what we want to do. And on the channel, that's what I want to do, because I'm starting to do a lot of projectors and TVs, and I want to see like how accurate are they out of the box, and what do you need to do to get them to be the best that they can be. So these are kind of like the project samples. It shows you what you're doing. So for example, this is a grayscale meter right here. So it's showing you what your grayscale is. And it's saying 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. But you see how your blue is not nearly as good at your 10%. It's just off the line. Like it should all be on one line. And so in your television, exactly. So in your television, like for example, even this cheap television I bought the other day, which is Hisense, I have 20 points of grayscale that I can go in and adjust. Yeah, well, this was before then, but yeah, I can adjust the blue, the green, and the red for this to be a perfect linear line, so we don't get that black crush anymore. And same with the red, same with the green, until our colors are the same. And so you see this menu up here. So it's got this gray one. That's going to be your grayscale. And then the one next to it's going to be your color. So that's when you adjust your color to be your color, right? And then this last one is your primary colors, and then also your secondary colors. And then they have a bunch of graphs that you can go in here. This is kind of like Rue in the essence that it's harder to utilize right off the bat, but you can do it. And you will need a laptop for this, because you're going to have to hook up a laptop or some type of Blu-ray or DVD that has these test signals that run it. This program has it all in it. You just press the play button and you can do it, or one of these buttons, and it will do everything for you. Does that make sense? Uh-oh, we lost Justin. Yeah, so Ratings uses CalMin software, and you can use CalMin software. The reason why I didn't bring up CalMin software is because most DIYers aren't going to be using CalMin software. CalMin is like $1,500, I think, to begin, like entry level and on up. So something like this you can get in as cheap as, like, if you buy the Spider X Pro, I think it's like $100 or $150 for the actual meter itself. And then all you have download is HCFR, which is free, and you're in the game for $150.
That's neat. One of those things that I should be doing on my end whenever I record a video is I should be color grading my videos so that someone can watch it on a monitor that's been calibrated correctly and it sounds right. And I don't think I'm ever going to get to the point where I can color grade video. There's just so many more details we got to keep up with when filming. But interesting. My camera will automatically white balance, and this camera here will do it as well. And you can see if I move out of away from the light, how it will change. but as long as I hold still, it'll kind of do that. And it's just interesting to think that you can now just take this thing and hold it up against the monitor, the TV screen, and adjust, and the machine will tell you if it's right. And that's kind of cool.
So I'm going to go back to AJC. Well, yeah. And the thing is, if you buy one of these, you can calibrate your monitor and it should show you an accurate representation of what it's going to look like on your phone when you're done, when you export it.
All right.
So that's a good thing for like an actual person that's actually doing this for a living. You should have one of these, even if it's the cheapest one, to calibrate your monitor, if nothing else. That way, you know what it's going to export back to your television, especially since it uses software base. Now, AJC did mention Calman has home options for like $150. It's kind of true. It's only for certain televisions, right? Like one's for an LG OLED, and it can actually do the calibration right on the television. One's for like Panasonic, one's for something, and they're for certain televisions. So it's true, but it's not entirely accurate as well. There are other things that you might want to do. You might end up wanting to buy some upgrades for HDR tests. That's like $45 to buy those test things so that you can use it with that particular program or with Dolby Vision, those types of things. You'll want to upgrade those things. However, not everyone wants to spend at least $150, and I get that. So here's something that you should be doing if you don't do that. Even if you don't want to spend $150, which I think you should at least be buying this Spears and Munsell Blu-ray disc. It's not great. I'm not going to say it's unbelievable. I'm not going to say it's $40 for a reason, but it'll at least start getting you closer. Basically, it's a calibration disc. Do you ever remember, like on DVDs, like the THX standard DVDs, like if you ever went into like the options, they'd actually have some video things, and you could calibrate your television a little bit with your video. It'd help you like with your brightness and your contrast. That's pretty much what this does. So this doesn't use a calibration disc. It does, but it doesn't use a colorimeter or anything like that. You're all doing this pretty much by eye. It's not necessarily recommended, but it's better than nothing, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
So this would be one of those like, hey.
So I see a little box there with some gray and some white and some black, and it's like adjust this until the white's white and the gray is gray and the black is black, right?
Exactly. They'll do a little bit. It's definitely not going to be nearly as good as something like you would get with a colorimeter and HCFR. So what's kind of cool is this. So for example, let me show you HCFR one more time to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. So if we do, so if we go back to HCFR and we notice the 10% gray is off, we can just hit this 10 right here, hit play, and it'll start doing that signal over and over and over again. And we can adjust just that one portion until we get that perfectly on target. And then rerun our test and then keep doing that for every one of these points until it's perfectly done. And that's the reason why the colorimeter is so important, because this sits right on your screen, or if it's a projector, it's going to be aimed towards your screen, right? So that way you can actually visually capture it, because obviously it can't go on the screen. Otherwise it can't actually capture the pictures.
Right.
It's captured a gray screen.
Aim it at the screen. You don't aim it at the projector lens.
Yep, you aim it at the screen, not the projector lens. And then you can calibrate it that way. So for me, this is like a really exciting thing that I just don't feel like a lot of people realize that for like as cheap as $150, you can start calibrating your own screens. And I think you would be amazed at the difference. I just calibrated my one downstairs. It's the only one I've done so far. And I was never happy with the picture. And finally, I'm like, okay, this is what it's supposed to be. And I want to mention this because video and audio calibration, I feel like people get so confused. You don't have to leave it at the perfect calibration. So if you get it calibrated perfectly and it's not bright enough for you, you can still increase the backlight, increase whatever you want to do if you want to. This should get you though in the right spot to get all your colors right. And then if you want to make a couple changes to that, go right ahead. Same thing with like audio calibration as well. You know, it should get you in the right ballpark. And then if you want to make some minor
Right.
changes, make those minor changes.
Right, exactly. I saw a comment earlier. I think it may have been from Andy. You know, same thing. You know, yes, this is like the auto calibration. Yes, it gets you close, but from there, you still have the ability to use the ultimate test. You know, your eyes and ears, and see if it looks good to you and sounds good to you.
Exactly. Yep. It doesn't have to be perfect. No one says that you're going to see exactly how I'm going to see, and no one said, you know, you're going to hear exactly how I'm going to hear. So, you know, use this as a guide to get you where you want to go, and then go from there. And so I'm going to start putting some whenever I calibrate something, I'm going to put the calibration settings on the internet for you to try. And if you want to go ahead and try it out, go right ahead. Did I lose Justin again? I did. All right, guys. This is your time to ask any questions that you might want that we have not maybe answered. So if you guys have some questions, let us know, because I feel like we did a pretty decent job going over most of it, but maybe you have something that you want to go over.
All right, I think I'm back. Sorry about that.
Finally, geez, everyone was like, "Where the heck did he
No,
go?"
maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not back. No one seems to hear me. Okay.
No, you're back. You're fine. All right. Well, we'll just pretend. We'll pretend like he's here, and we'll just go without him. So, Justin, what do you have coming up on your channel? Ha! I like this. What is the average airspeed of an unladen swallow? Well, is that an African swallow
What do you
or a
mean? Do you
European
mean
swallow?
African swallow or European swallow?
It's sad we both know that too. An African swallow or your I don't know. That is so funny, man. That is a great movie. And for those who don't know what we're talking about the Monty Python Search for the Holy Grail. So if any of you guys have not seen that, you should. All right. So Justin,
the Holy Grail.
What do you have going on your channel? What do you have coming up? Oh, actually, wait. Someone asked one question that I want to answer first. What would you do if you didn't have any measuring equipment? What would be the other way of measuring things?
You just have to tune by ear and by eye.
Yep. Use your brain. And that's not like.
And when I. And, you know, when something sounds terrible, you'll know it, right? When something looks terrible, you'll know it. You might not know how to fix it, but you'll know it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was just getting ready to say is the problem with doing it by ear, and there's nothing wrong with it, okay, by doing it that way. But the problem with that is when you get measuring equipment, you're now visually seeing what you're hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And without that, it's just kind of a guessing game. I mean, there's just not much you can do about it. You can download, like if you have a phone, you can download like a Bluetooth app that will play like white noise or something of that nature. And you can maybe, if you have a DSP, start working on some areas to hear the differences going on. But otherwise, a lot of it is really just hard to do without that.
You know what, though? Sometimes, though, it's obvious. When I was testing that head unit a couple of weeks ago, I turned it up and I could hear the distortion about where the test equipment measured it. So, you know, if you just stop and listen critically, you can hear. Now, I don't have a golden ear. I can't pick out the difference between this high-end speaker and that high-end speaker, but I can know when something sounds terrible. And sometimes that is worth a lot.
Well, and I think this is one of those times too where the more you do it and the more you've actually physically seen what's going on as well, is the more that you can easily point to those, oh, that's what's going on. So I think it's harder if you've never seen it for a lot of people.
up too loud.
Are you there? All right. Yeah, you can do a tone generator to match what you hear as well. That's a good way as well. You can tune, and yeah, you can tune remotely if you want to, as long as you have a good enough microphone or something that tells you that. Oh, would you trust TS specs from suppliers? This was a good question. I actually had this started and I forgot to go back to it. Depends on the supplier. I hate to say it. Dayton Audio is usually pretty good. GRS, anything Parts Express does, and that's because they actually measure it in-house from the samples that they get in that they're selling you. So they're typically pretty good. Other ones, not so much. Car Audio, yeah. I haven't found Scar. Heck no, yeah. Most of them I don't trust, and that's where DATS really comes in handy, because you can actually verify the TS specs, and if they're not right, well,
I'm going to try this audio only for a while. Can you hear me? Am I back?
Yes.
You know, what I trust TS specs from suppliers, what I've noticed is there are some brands that consistently have inconsistent parameters. They don't mathematically match to each other. SCAR is one of them. I've never entered a SCAR into WinISD where the stats match the auto calculation from WinISD.
That's a good. And I think that's one of these, like, what is the manufacturer you're talking to? I'll tell you this, like, if a manufacturer claims things like, for example, what's a cheap car audio, like Boss claims things that we already know aren't true, right? So if they claim an amp to be 10,000 watts, we know it's like 500, that we already know is wrong. So therefore, would I trust their TS specs on it? No. Like, I already know that they lie about some specs or overly inflate them.
Sensitivity numbers are made up as well. Here's this 5,000 watt subwoofer with a 99 dB sensitivity. No, there's no such thing. That doesn't exist.
Or like Klipsch, their sensitivity is highly overrated. I haven't seen one of their speakers that I would honestly agree with their SPL rating. And because usually what they do is they pick the peak of their graph. So there might be one peak in their response that hits like 93 decibels. They're like, our speaker's 93 decibels, but all the other frequencies are at 90 decibels or below. And you're like, what? No, it's not. Like, that one spot is, but like, that's the outlier, not the actual thing. So yeah, that just comes back to what we just said. I'm going to mention this because AJC brought this up, and this is true. The DVS is what I use as well. He said you can buy test patterns here, and you can buy it, and they're very inexpensive. I believe you can buy HDR10 and Dolby Vision, for example, file package. It's a 1 gigabyte package, $45. And that's pretty darn cheap. You can put it on something like your Plex server. You can put it on an he had mentioned like a USB stick. Yeah, basically you can put it on basically anything you want to be able to send it to the television, but you can burn it to a DVD if you want to, or you can buy the DVD package if you want. That's completely up to you.
That is cool.
Oh, Andy reached 3,000 viewers. I did not know. Congratulations, Andy. That's awesome. We always want to, anytime anyone does something cool, we want to know about it because we want to give you guys a special salute because you guys are all, I mean, I love watching all this stuff.
I know how hard it is to get a channel going. The first 100 subscribers takes 45 years to get, it's
yeah, it really is crazy. All right. So Justin, we're ready to,
yes, sir.
We're ready to close this out. So,
all right,
what do you got going on, man?
Well, I got a lot going on. Someone had asked in the chat about the head unit that caught on fire. I didn't catch on fire. It smoked. I guess where there's smoke, there's fire. They sent me something else to test that's going to be really interesting. And I have the components laid out. Just got to film the video and edit the video and upload the video. And that'll come out sometime in December. I've got another NVX subwoofer and Oh man, this thing is amazing. Just modeling it in WinISD, I can tell that this is going to be an epic subwoofer. The VCW 12, it would be a fantastic home theater subwoofer. It
Oh,
would be great in that setup. And I am working on that speaker kit that I botched. And let me show you the. I'll give you all a preview. Some of my
I
patrons
want
have
to see
already
that.
seen some of the pictures. And let's see here. Let me share screen. Here we go. All right. How about that, man?
Oh yeah, that veneer looks significantly better.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That looks great, right? Well, and the question is, how does it sound?
How does it
Well,
sound?
I made another mistake. One of them, the tweeter's not hooked, and on the other one, the woofer's not hooked up. So I got to take them apart. I made my mistake. This project is snake bit. Every time I make a little bit of progress, something goes wrong. I made a mistake somewhere. I just hope it's a mistake I can correct. Hopefully
sure
it's
it
something I can fix. I hope I don't have to rebuild the entire crossover again, because I might have to call up Hi-Vi and see if they can you scrounge for some parts.
So I'm gonna give a special tip right now for anyone that's building these, especially for speaker kits like this that have the dual binding posts. First thing to do is you see the gold metal between the two binding posts. Remove those. Okay.
Oh yeah.
That basically no, and then hook your tweeter up to the top one and your woofer down to the bottom one. Keep your crossover out of the box and test it first with the woofer going to the woofer and the tweeter going because
that would have been a
because
good
you
idea.
yeah I know and I do it. This is how I do all of my speakers before I put them in the box. That's why I use double binding posts almost always on a two-way. Not because I care about biamping or anything. It's to test, to make sure, okay, the tweeter's hooked up right, the woofer's hooked up right, I'm getting everything right, and then make sure that I don't have any cold solder points or anything like that. It really does help. But you know what? Like, that's an easy mistake.
I've put together, I don't know, I've lost count how many kits I've put together, a dozen, and they've never not worked. They've worked every time. I've never put together a kit that failed. And so this just, everything I touch turns to crap when it comes to this kit, which is really sad because this looks really damn good. This is probably the best looking speaker kit I've ever built. And so I'm excited about it. But there's going to be another video where at the end I go, what's it sound like? Hell if I know. I screwed it up again.
They become really nice wall decor.
That's what they have become. So I'm a little bit frustrated, but I'm going to still try to make it work. There's the inside scoop. I have failed in an epic fashion multiple times, and it'll happen to you one day too. It's part of life.
Happens to me all the time. What are you talking about? All right, guys. So let me tell you a little bit about. Well, before I go there, I wanted to spend some special time thanking you guys. You guys were amazing today. You guys did some awesome super chats, and it really does mean a lot to us because it does help us know that you guys really care about some of the details that we go into, especially some of these things like measuring and things of that nature where some people just don't care about. And so for us, like, that means a lot to us because I know it means a lot to both Justin and I, because we couldn't be doing what we're doing if we didn't know how to measure. So we want to share those things with you guys as well. So thank you so much. And thank you for taking your time to listen to us. We like that. We really appreciate everyone that takes a minute to listen to us, no matter how much of the show you can catch. Now, I have an amplifier that I'm almost finished building. It should be out hopefully soon. Yeah, it's cool. Beautiful. But my patrons have seen it. It's really nice looking. It really is pretty. I did the whole amplifier case from scratch. So
did you 3D print it or what?
I'm not telling you. No, it's not 3D printed. I will tell you that it's not 3D printed. I'll tell you, it's not 3D printed. It's prettier than that. And but it's pretty neat. I had to design it in SketchUp, had to design it. I brought my patrons kind of through this process. It's been pretty cool. So that's coming up. And I still have to get that edifier video out to you guys. I did not get it out last week like I had hoped, but this week there should be no reason why it won't come out. And David K said, "It's sick, beautiful," which he's either talking about your head or my amplifier build. I'm not sure which one.
Probably the amp.
I don't know. Maybe. You're probably right. All right, guys. That's all we have for today. This is Toys DIY Audio and Justin for sound advice, and we're out.